Greetings in the name of the Most High Yahuwah and his Son Yahusha to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. I am Brother Hiram, and in today's episode of the Kodesh Nation podcast, I'm going to talk about extending favor in marriage. Extending favor in marriage. Now, favor, you're probably more familiar with the term grace as it appears in our English Bibles, but that's more correctly translated as favor. And so that's what I'm going to use. But extending favor in marriage. Now, what is favor? What does it mean to extend favor in marriage? I mean, you know how we use the word favor in our culture. Hey, can you do me a favor? In other words, you're wanting somebody to do something for you that they're not obligated to do, that they really don't have to do, but they can choose to do it. They're doing you a favor. And so extending favor, especially unmerited favor, that's a very popular way to put it in the theological world, the religious world. They talk about unmerited favor. In other words, it's something that you do not earn, but something that a person makes a decision that they are going to do for you. Much the same as Yahusha, that it is by his favor that he came, he died for our sins, that praise Yahuwah, Yahuwah rose him from the dead the third day, praise Yahuwah, and he laid down his life for us. He didn't do that because we merited that, because we earned that. He laid down his life for us. That was a pure act of favor. In other words, Yahusha did us a huge favor. Hallelujah. In laying down his life for us, dying for our sins. And even Yahuwah himself. If you look at, I believe it's Deuteronomy chapter 9, where time and time again, he talks about how he delivered our forefathers, the children of Israel, out of Mitzrayim and bringing them into the promised land. And time and again, he says, it's not for your righteousness that I'm doing this, because you all are a stiff-necked people, but it's because of the promise that I made to the fathers. It doesn't have anything to do with you. It doesn't have anything to do with how righteous you are or you earning this place with me. So we see grace or favor even in the Hebrew scriptures. Some people have this wrong idea that it was all law in the quote-unquote Old Testament, but it's all grace in the quote-unquote New Testament. Well, no. Favor has been there from the very beginning. Praise Yahuwah. And so it was favor then, and it's favor now. Praise Yahuwah. Now, favor has a purpose that comes with it, that even though our forefathers were chosen because of Yahuwah's promise to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were still expected to uphold a standard before the Most High. Praise Yahuwah. That even though their calling was of favor, that they were expected to walk in obedience. And so we see the balance that comes with favor, that favor is not an excuse to sin. It's not an excuse to just do what you want to do, but it puts you in a position where that you can live up to the standard that is expected of you, and you can strive to live up to the standard expected of you. And that if you fall short of it, just know that there is help for you to get back on your feet and keep moving forward and keep pressing toward the mark. In other words, it's favor that actually produces those fruits of righteousness. It actually produces obedience. Praise Yahuwah. And so we want to look at it within the context of marriage. Because what we want to make sure we do, brothers and sisters, is we want to make sure that we have a purely scriptural view and approach to marriage, that we're not allowing the world to come in and pollute our views, to come in and pollute what we believe in practice when it comes to marriage. And we have to be careful in this area, brothers and sisters, because we are the salt of the earth. And if the salt loses its savor, then it's good for nothing but to be thrown on the dunghill and trampled underfoot. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's the problem, is the salt has lost its savor. That those of us who call ourselves Israelites or Christians or Bible believers of any sort, I mean, our divorce rate is pretty much parallel with the world's divorce rate. We're not showing, collectively speaking, we're not showing the world that we have anything better than what they have. Now, of course, you're going to have your few individuals that shine, that stand out, that are doing a wonderful job, but there's not enough of them. And so this is part of the purpose of this episode, is that I want to motivate more of us to be amongst those ranks so that we can be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, that the world could look at us. Our unbelieving, unawakened brothers and sisters can look at us and see the light of Ha Maschiach, not just in our lives, but in our marriages. Praise Yahuwah. So I'm going to come from 1 Peter 2, and I'm going to start in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 18. So this is where the context starts. Even though I'm going to be going into chapter 3, it starts in chapter 2. So 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 18. It says, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all reverence, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the crooked ones. For this is favor, if because of conscience toward Elohim anyone bears up under grief, suffering unrighteously. For what credit is there in enduring a beating when you sin? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure, this is favor with Elohim. For to this you are called, because Mashiach also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who being reviled did not revile in return, suffering did not threaten, but committed to him who judges righteously, who himself bore our sins in his body on the timber, so that we, having died to sins, might live unto righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed. For you are like sheep going astray, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your beings." So look at what's going on here, that servants are being called to be subject to their masters with all reverence, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the crooked ones. So if you're going to be subject with all reverence to a crooked master, it is going to involve some suffering. It's going to involve some suffering in the flesh. You're going to be doing things that you don't want to do, but you're going to be doing those things to the esteem of Yah. You're going to be doing those things because you love Yah and you want to bring him esteem, and you want him to be praised and lifted up through this. And it gives the example of Yahusha, his example of suffering, his example of him accomplishing the will of Yah. And in order for him to do so, he had to suffer. He had to suffer and remain in a state of righteousness and not sin. He was reviled not again. He suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judges righteously. Praise Yahuwah. And so that is the example that the servant is to follow. Praise Yahuwah. To remain in a state of righteousness before the Most High. There's some things he's going to have to suffer. There's some things he's going to have to do that he doesn't want to do. And that's what it means to suffer in the flesh. Kepha, Peter said that he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the will of man, but to the will of Yah. Praise Yahuwah. Praise Yah. And so look at that. Look at that example of that Mashiach that he set for us in his suffering. And so the way that servants should relate to their masters should be grounded in that example, should be grounded in Maschiach and in the example that he set. That if we suffer with him, we will also reign with him. But be warned now, because Yahusha said that he that does not take up his stake and follow me, he is not worthy of me. So if a servant is not willing to take up his stake and follow Yahusha and do what is instructed here by Kepha, Peter, the emissary, the apostle, then he is not worthy of Yahusha, because he's not willing to take up his stake and follow Yahusha and follow Yahusha's example of suffering. Praise Yahuwah. So I said all that to lay the foundation for what we're going to get into in chapter 3. Now, I believe that Yahuwah, in his infinite wisdom, had this laid out just like this to give us a accurate, a scriptural perspective of how we should approach our marriages. There's too much there are too many elements of the Disney, Hollywood fantasy world when it comes to marriage. There's too much influence from the secular world, secular psychology and psychiatry and sociology and the philosophies of men. There's too much of that is lingering in our marriages, brothers and sisters. Praise Yahuwah. You have those who say that they walk in Torah and walk after the footsteps of Yahusha, yet they get divorced, and they divorce over irreconcilable differences. You have sisters saying that Yah wants them to be happy, and so that's why they're going to walk away from a certain man, to divorce a certain man, because Yah wants them to be happy. Sounding just like the world now, just like the world. Praise Yahuwah. And this is men and women having worldly perspectives when it comes to marriage. Praise Yahuwah. You got men that just up and disappear, up and leave, up and disappear. And I've heard of testimonies of that before. Instead of enduring, praise Yahuwah, instead of standing for his family and standing for his marriage, enduring the storm, weathering the storm, and doing whatever it takes, just up and out. Can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. A lot of men have done that. Praise Yahuwah. And all of this is, whether it's a woman leaving a marriage because she's not happy, or a man just up and checking out because he can't stand the heat. It's all an unwillingness to take up our stake and follow Yahusha. It's all an unwillingness to suffer with Yahusha. Praise Yahuwah. This is why this is so vitally important, this teaching in application to marriage, brothers and sisters, because this right here is the foundation. If we get this here, everything else will be downhill. Everything else will just fall right in line if we can just get this, what I am bringing forth today. And not a matter of me bringing forth something as if I'm something great or special, but what Yah has to say to us through his apostle, Peter. Praise Yahuwah, about this vital subject. Praise Yah, because every marital problem that is amongst believers in Yah and Yahusha, every single solitary marital problem without exception ever, no exceptions. This is an absolute statement. Praise Yahuwah. No exceptions whatsoever. That in every single case, that if there is a problem, if two people cannot stay married, it is because either one of them refuses to deny themselves, take up their stake, follow Yahusha, or the other one refuses to deny themselves, take up their stake, and follow Yahusha, or they both refuse to deny themselves, take up their stake, and follow Yahusha. It's one of those three reasons without exceptions. Without exceptions. When it comes to believers in Yah and Yahusha, I'm not talking about the world. I don't know about the world. I'm not concerned with the world right now. I'm talking about those who say they believe in Yah, follow Torah, say they believe in Yahusha and what he has done for them, say they follow in the footsteps of Yahusha. Praise Yahuwah. That's who I am talking about. And if our marriages do not work out, they end in divorce, it'll be because of one of those three reasons. Somebody is refusing to suffer with Ha Maschiach. It's either the husband or the wife or both. Praise Yahuwah. And so this is why we have to understand that the problems that are going on in our marriages, our relationships, that it's not because of the Hebrew brothers or because of the Hebrew sisters. The real problem is our fallen nature. And when Hebrew brothers walk after their fallen human nature, then it creates problems and big problems. And when the Hebrew sisters walk after their fallen human nature, then it creates problems and big problems. Praise Yahuwah. But if we can come together, praise Yahuwah, and walk in the footsteps of Ha Maschiach and practically apply what he teaches. Because I know some hear me say that and they say, oh, well, that sounds so good and flowery, but easier said than done. No, I'm talking about giving practical application to his teachings. He said that as you would that men should do to you, do ye likewise unto them. This is the Torah and the Nevi'im. Probably about 80% of our problems could be solved if we could practically apply that one verse to our marriages. Treat one another like we want to be treated. Praise Yahuwah. Don't be selfish. Don't be self-absorbed and self-centered. Praise Yahuwah. And just don't expect to be treated real well by the other when you're not treating them well, when you're treating your wife disrespectfully, dishonorably, but you want her to honor you and respect you. Praise Yahuwah. No, before honor is humility. You want your wife to honor you, honor her as the weaker vessel. Honor her, respect her, love her. You want your husband to love you. You want your husband to honor you. You want to be treated as a queen, you need to treat him as a king. Praise Yahuwah. You can't go around wanting to be treated like a queen, but you treat your husband like he's some type of court jester or something, or like he's some type of court servant. But you want to be the queen. You see, that's a heathen queen. You have heathen queens that they reign by themselves, that they were the actual ruler of a nation. It's just one woman. Praise Yahuwah. But see, in Yah's economy, if you're a queen, then you have a king. And if you have a king, that king has authority. So there's nothing wrong with the sister wanting to be treated like a queen, but she has to treat her husband like a king. She has to respect his authority. She has to respect his kingship. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's what I'm talking about. As you would that men should do to you, do ye likewise unto them. This is the Torah and the Nevi'im. We could really go on and on about the practical application of that one verse and how it can help us in our marriages. Praise Yahuwah. So I'm going to go on. And in chapter 3, it says, now this is the key phrase right here that ties everything together. In the same way. In other words, we're not getting away from this thought that started in verse 18, talking about servants be subject to your masters, and then basing that on the sufferings of Ha Maschiach. We are not getting into a different subject, but Peter said, in the same way, wives be subject to your own husbands, so that if any are disobedient to the word, they without a word might be won by the behavior of their wives, having seen your blameless behavior and reverence. Your world should not be outward, arranging the hair, wearing of gold, or putting on dresses, but the hidden man of the heart in the incorruptible ornament of a meek and peaceable spirit, which is of great value before Elohim. For in this way, in former times, the Kodesh women who trusted in Elohim also adorned themselves, being subject to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him master, of whom you became children, doing good and not frightened by any fear. So why does it say in the same way? It says in the same way that as a servant, in order for him to be subject to his master, not just the good ones, but the crooked ones also, he is going to have to suffer with Ha Maschiach. He's going to have to be willing to deny himself, take up a stake, follow the master Yahusha. So in the same way, if a wife is to be subject to her husband, praise Yahuwah, if she is to submit to her husband, you know, this feministic concept has poisoned a lot of the daughters of Zion with this idea that, well, a man, he has to be worthy of submission. He has to be worthy of my submission. And that's poison. The only time a woman should question the worthiness of a man for her to submit to is before she gets married. Yes, you want to make sure that somebody is worthy for you to submit to as a wife to a husband before you get married. But once you are married, the deal is sealed. Praise Yahuwah. The milk is spilt. The deal is sealed. And that is poison, praise Yahuwah, that comes from feminism when it gets in the minds of married women. You have married women that they don't submit, and their excuse is, well, I don't believe my husband is walking worthy of my submission. Well, this destroys it. Kefa destroys that feministic notion. And that's based in pride. I'll deal with it in another episode, praise Yahuwah, but that's based in pride. When a wife, she questions her husband's worthiness of submission and doesn't look at herself. Is she worthy to die for? Is she worthy of a man laying down his life for? And not acknowledging the truth that both the husband and the wife are both going to have to extend grace, because there are going to be times when the husband does not walk worthy of submission and she needs to submit anyway. There are going to be times when the wife does not walk worthy of his sacrifice, of him laying down his life and loving her and not being embittered. There are going to be times when that wife does not walk worthy of that, and he's going to have to love her anyway. That's called extending grace, extending favor. And it's a beautiful thing when couples can do that, but they have to be willing to suffer with Ha Maschiach if they're going to get to that place. Praise Yahuwah, because if they're fleshly, if they're self-centered, if they're self-absorbed, they'll never get there. Praise Yahuwah, they're going to have to execute that flesh, or crucify the flesh, as we used to say. Praise Yahuwah. In order to make that happen, it takes a lot of humility. Before honor is humility. It takes a lot of humility for us to get off of our high horse and realize that it's no easier for our spouse to fulfill their biblical duty toward us as it is for us to fulfill ours toward them. It's no easier. We both have to suffer in Ha Maschiach. Praise Yahuwah. So sisters, let's stop acting like, it's some great prize and some great magnanimous thing for you to submit to somebody, and how they have to jump through a million hoops in order to get you to submit to them. Praise Yahuwah. Or a man that, for a woman to be loved by you unconditionally and to receive of your provision and sacrifice, that she has to be all this, that, and the third, and it's such a big deal. And no, that's what you're called to, brother. That's what you're called to. That's what you're called to, sister. Praise Yahuwah. Let's humble ourselves. Praise Yahuwah. Humble ourselves. And you know what? Yah will barak us. Yah will barak our marriages. Yah will lift us up if we humble ourselves. Praise Yahuwah. So like I said, Kefa obliterates this notion, because even if a man obeys not the word, now this is generally regarded as an unbeliever, but it could be a man that is a believer, but he's erring, he's backslidden, he obeys not the word, but generally an unbeliever. Think about that, sister. If you are called to submit to an unbeliever, how in the world are you going to tell a Yah-fearing brother who is pursuing righteousness, but may stumble from time to time, may have faults and imperfections? How are you going to try to make him feel like he's unworthy of your submission? But this heathen, this pagan, praise Yahuwah, he somehow is worthy of your submission, according to Yah, according to the apostles now. Praise Yahuwah. Nah, that's a manipulation game. Put that thing away. Just do what the book says. You'll be Baruch. Praise Yahuwah. That even if a man is an unbeliever, if you're married to an unbeliever and you got to submit, praise Yahuwah, then you're gonna have to suffer with Ha Maschiach. That is not going to be easy. Praise Yahuwah. That old heathen said, darling, fix me some pork chops. You're going to have to fix them up. You don't have to eat them yourself now. Praise Yah. You don't have to break Yah's laws, but that old heathen wants you to fry him up some pork chops. Guess what? You got to fry him up them pork chops. Just don't eat them yourself. Praise Yahuwah. So it's not going to be easy if you have to submit to a man like that. That's the whole point. That's why he said, in the same way, wives, be subject to your husbands. Praise Yahuwah. So this is an act of faith, an act of trust in Yah. Praise Yahuwah. Even as Sarah had to trust Yah in submitting to Abraham, because Abraham didn't always make the best decisions. Praise Yah, and getting her in dangerous predicaments with these heathen kings, and she had to trust Yah, but she was subject to her master, Abraham. Praise Yahuwah. Now, verse 7, in the same way, husbands, live understandingly together, giving respect to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the favor of Chai, so that your prayers are not hindered. In other words, it says in the same way to the husbands also. Husbands, you're going to have to suffer in the flesh. You're going to have to deny yourself, take up your stake, follow the master Yahusha. Praise Yahuwah. Just like a lot of the sisters that they would rather submit to a man who they deem worthy of submission, that you would rather lay down your life for a woman that is appreciative of your sacrifice, a woman who doesn't take you for granted, a woman who is ladylike, soft, feminine, respectful, honors you, submits to you. Though you would rather be a living sacrifice for a woman like that, guess what? Your wife is not always going to be that. She may act contrary to that. And you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to love her as yourself and be not embittered against her anyway. You're going to have to be a living sacrifice unto her anyway, even if she doesn't meet your ideal. And you know what? When she doesn't meet your ideal, you're going to have to suffer with Ha Maschiach in order to make that happen. Praise Yahuwah. And so in doing so, brothers and sisters, we extend favor in marriage. The husband to the wife to the husband, we extend favor. But see, it takes humility for each the husband and the wife to admit their need for favor. You need favor. Praise Yahuwah, you need favor. You're going to have some faults and shortcomings that are going to need to be covered with favor. It's not just you having to show favor. No, that your husband or wife is going to have to show favor to you. So if you're humble and you recognize that need in your life, this shouldn't be a problem. Praise Yahuwah. And so in a nutshell, because of the sacrifice of Ha Maschiach, that husbands and wives need to follow Ha Maschiach's example and extend favor to one another, and it can be a beautiful thing. So brothers and sisters, I'm going to shut it down with that. You want to communicate with me in any way, email me at kodeshnation@gmail.com. That's kodeshnation, KODESHNATION @gmail.com. Write me an email. Let me know you're out there. Praise Yahuwah. So, to the true sheep that hear his voice, keep building on the solid rock. Shalom.